The holidays aren't magical for every student. For kids with trauma or neurosensitivities, they often highlight what's missing: family stability, traditions, lack of structure, or even simply the basic needs. While some students return to our classrooms energized, others come back feeling anxious, less than, broken, or ashamed. In this episode, I want to talk about why the holidays can be so hard for these kids and how you, as an educator, can create a safe, supportive space as they transition back into the classroom. You'll walk away with strategies to help them feel grounded, valued, and ready for the new year. Welcome to the Society's Child podcast, where we have real conversations about being a trauma-responsive educator in the midst of a significant mental health crisis. Hi, I'm Trish Senzak, a former educator, compassion advocate, and Jesus lover, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Are you feeling confuzzled about your students' behavior and needs? You're not alone. If trauma-informed strategies leave you wondering, what's next? Don't worry. My friend, I've been there too. As a foster mom and a child of complex trauma mixed with my experience as a teacher, it's led me to finding a compassionate, whole child approach that's evidence-based, practical, and transformational, and I'm so eager to share it with you. Whether you want to connect with your students on a deeper level, create a trauma-sensitive environment, or you just need a little bit of encouragement or support, you're in the right place. So grab a drink, a pen, or your earbuds, and let's work together to create a safe and student-attuned trauma-responsive school culture. Society's children need you, so let's get started. So the holidays are over, and most kids are heading back to school with stories of fun, food, gifts, but not all of them. For some students, the holidays bring reminders of loss, instability, unmet expectations, or simply feeling as though they were left out of something. Today, I want to talk to you about the why behind how the holidays feel for some of these kids. When I was in the classroom, I would often think about the diverse landscape of the kids sitting in front of me and think about how some of them would celebrate and some of them didn't. I was brought up in a situation with a lot of foster families. I was brought up in a group home, and in those situations, there was a lot of celebration. Then I would eventually return home to a family that did not celebrate the holidays at all due to religious reasons. It wasn't until I got into my later teen years that I was able to move out away from home and try to navigate how I felt and what I would do for the holidays for me. So as our kids are navigating these things that are going on in their lives right now that may make the holidays very difficult, I thought it would be a great time, especially since this particular episode is landing right at the holiday season. I wanted you to be thinking about the kids who have trauma and the ones that don't, who are just neurologically different, and how you as the educator can help them reset or feel safe or really put down those expectations about the holidays, especially when it comes to your classroom. So let's start by looking at why the holidays can be especially tough. So the first thing that I often think about is not necessarily someone who's been extremely traumatized, but it could be a normal everyday thing, and that's a broken home situation or missing family. So kids could be grieving the loss of a split family. Maybe they can't be with the whole family this year, or there's a certain sibling or a certain parent that they would like to be with. Maybe they feel tossed between two families, two sets of traditions. They could also be grieving the divorced parents or lost traditions from the way things used to be, or separation from siblings or friends in certain neighborhoods of where they grew up. There is a possibility that maybe they have even lost someone that they're grieving and they can't be with that person again. Because in divorced or changed, broken homes and those kinds of settings, a lot of times people exit out of our lives for no fault of the children, but it's still a loss of some sort for them. The second reason that they could be having a difficult time with the holidays is something that might have to do with addiction or some type of chaos at home. Sometimes the addictive parent is very absent, or they're caught up in their addiction and they might totally leave. In fact, I just heard a story about a mom who got fed up with whatever was going on at home, took the kids and left for the holidays. And so the kids were separated from their father and from the situation together as a family. So these kids could be coming back from environments that are filled with stress, neglect, instability, chaos, a lot of tumultuous stuff going on. So we have to be conscious of the fact that not everybody has this wonderfully traditional type holiday season that we often see in the media. What about our foster kids or our families that have changes? They may miss their biological families, or they may long for the way things used to be, especially if they're foster and they've not been allowed to see their siblings, or they've not been allowed to see their families. So if there is a tradition that they have typically had and they're now in a new family, all of that instability of being with this new family can be very unsettling for someone that is trying to fit into a place that feels very strange to them. All of these family changes can change the flavor of the holidays. In all of these situations that I've mentioned, there is some type of grief or loss. For anyone experiencing grief and loss, whether it's a fresh loss, a loss in this year, it could be the first without somebody. The holidays and this type of loss put together can often bring up a lot because it can reopen the wounds of losing a loved one and the ache of that empty chair or someone not being there or saying something or being part of the tradition that's going on. So we have to remember there could be some grief and loss happening with these kids as well. The other thing that might happen that we don't even realize and think about sometimes is the unmet expectations of the holidays. TV, the media, social media, it paints a picture of this ideal holiday, and that doesn't match their reality of what's really happening in their lives. So they're comparing themselves to somebody else, and they're feeling shameful, or they're feeling less than, or feeling a lot of disappointment around the holidays when their neighbors outside have this big Christmas or a lot of gifts and things that they're going through. These kids might be coming back with some sort of less than feeling. And so these unmet expectations can leave them feeling empty and returning to our classroom as if it was a big letdown. Speaking of gifts and big Christmases, sometimes there's financial struggles going on in families. Kids may feel embarrassed if they didn't get gifts that the neighbor kids got or kids in their classes got, or if they didn't have big celebrations or go on big trips or go places or do things like some of the other kids did. Because this is an extended break, many times it's also combined with a trip or a vacation where kids get to go places and do things. And if that's the situation, many times these kids don't get to participate in that because the financial ability is not there with many of these families. Hi friend, I wanted to pause right here and just take a moment to ask you for a special favor. If you are finding anything helpful in this episode or any previous episodes that you've listened to, would you pause right now, go into the Apple Podcast app, scroll down to the bottom of the show, and find the Leave a Review button. It would be awesome if you would take a moment and follow the show and do this. There are people out there just like you looking for this information, and this would help the algorithm get this into other people's hands, and it would be helpful for them as well. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's one of the biggest favors that you can do for me. I appreciate you and thank you in advance for taking the time to do this. So let's get right back to the show. The other thing that we have to take into consideration, and this isn't necessarily a trauma thing, but there are situations where families don't celebrate or celebrate in different ways. And many times we, again, put this picture on the holidays that it's supposed to look like a certain thing and have an expectation of a certain way. Just like when I was growing up and returned into a particular family, there was no Christmas tree. There were no exchange of presents. There was nothing going on. Sometimes kids, whether this has been how they grew up and they're used to that because that's the way their culture has raised them, or if families have suddenly made these changes and they're trying to follow the religious rituals or the religious customs or the cultural customs, or they've married into it, we need to take into consideration that not all families celebrate the same way or celebrate at all. So this can also leave kids feeling isolated, different, unique, set apart, and we might want to take into consideration that these kids are still having these normal thoughts and questions that are going through their mind. We also need to be thinking about just the typical loneliness or the comparison that comes from the holidays. Many small families or new families to the area, people with limited traditions or social isolation, can make the holidays feel super empty, especially if these expectations have been put on there. In all of these situations, there can be thoughts of less than, or thoughts of I'm not like them, or missing out, or empty. The voices in the kids' heads can bring up this comparison or this need to be part of something. And when they're not, it's even more magnified for teenagers or young adults or little kids who see their peers getting it and they don't quite understand why they're not. So many times this is not explained. It's just something that's there and there is a noticing of it. So just being aware of why the holidays can be so hard is so important to being able to just treat the landscape of your classroom in a way that is not an expectation that everybody had the same kind of break. So I think it's important as we're looking through this that we help kids feel safe and seen after the break. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It just takes some intentionality and some thought processes behind this. Because I grew up in a way that was very unique and different, it would often make me think as a teacher, there could be a child sitting in my room that grew up, even if it was one child that might have grown up like I did, someone in that room might not be having this normal societal type of a holiday. And so it was always important to me to find ways to creatively support the kids coming back, or the fact that there could be someone that felt different sitting in front of me. So here are some of the things that I would often try to do. Number one, I would welcome back from the break as a fresh start. So it wasn't about the past and the holidays. I kept the greetings very simple, pressure-free. I focused on the new year, not the past few weeks of what has happened. If they cared to share that with me, I tried to do it in a way that didn't feel like I was pointing anybody out. We didn't go around the room and talk about what we did. At least I tried not to do that. The second thing I would do is I'd be very mindful about questions. I would try to stay away from questions like, what did you get for Christmas? Or where did you go? So that if someone didn't have that experience, I would then ask things like, how are you feeling about being back? Or what are you excited about this year? It helps us and the kids think forward focused instead of past focused. And then it takes the pressure off of them having to explain whether they had a good time. Now, if the kids offered it, it was great. I would listen to them about that. And I would do the next thing that I often tried to do is provide an outlet. So if the kids did want to share this, it was an opportunity for them to talk to me about it and get excited about it. But for the ones that didn't, I would always try to provide outlets or art or private reflection time. So sometimes I might even have them write me a paragraph with a question that was open blanket statement and ask them to reflect on their future. And if there was anything that they wanted to share with me, they could. I just worded the question in a way that would be something that would open them up to talk about whatever they wanted, whether it was the past 2 weeks, the next year that's upcoming, or anything that they wanted to. And then I collected that. I did not make them talk about it in public. The next thing is where the neurodivergence comes in. A lot of our kids today have sensory issues. The holidays are low structured, at home, off kilter, and a lot of times we know that they get out of balance. They're no longer waking up at a certain time, going to bed at a certain time, especially today. They're on tech at all hours of the night. And so to try to rein them in and get them back in, I offered predictability and structure. So I would make sure that we go back to the schedules, we'd follow routines, we'd give plenty of heads up for changes, because they're already going to be triggered coming back into the classroom, having to going from the free flow and fun back into all this structured school stuff that they're are probably not really anticipating with open arms. Now, on the other hand, sometimes these kids do welcome coming back to school because things are so chaotic at home and it's not fun at home, or they're bored at home, or they don't like being with who they're with, and they look at our classrooms and our school setting as a place of an escape or a way to get away from that. So being conscious of those mentalities helps us be able to provide that safe place, that predictability, and that structure for them. The other thing that I would also do with kids is I would try to normalize differences in a way that helps highlight diverse holiday traditions, or emphasize that no two holidays look the same and that that's okay. So if before I'm writing something or they're talking about stuff in the group, I would always take time to welcome different opinions, welcome what's going on, encourage and affirm that whatever experience they had, that's okay. That was their normal. That it doesn't always happen the way we think or the way the media thinks that it should happen. And then next, I would, no matter what we're doing, is celebrate small wins, focusing on what's ahead rather than what's behind. And so then I would praise their effort for thinking about the future, praise their effort for thinking about goals, be really kind and focus on their kindness as well as their progress to think forward. We all want to try to grow through what we're doing instead of focusing on what we've done in the past. So celebrating those small wins, even if it's the effort of putting forth a new leaf, or thinking about the future, or thinking about how to make changes, or thinking about how to tackle something as good as we could do it or as well as we can do it in the future. And celebrating those small wins with them helps them to feel successful and safe as well. Helping them through these moments takes an extra challenge on our part of modeling the empathy and the grace around it. So we have to remember to say things like, it's okay if the holidays were hard, or you're safe here no matter what happens, or I'm sorry that might have happened. How can I help you through it? Something that makes them feel like you're in it together and that it's okay for them not to have had this perfect little holiday if they express something to you. Your classroom doesn't have to fix what's broken at home. That's not what this is about. Your classroom just needs to be a safe place to land. It could be an escape. It could be a place where they feel seen, they feel validated. Small changes in your words and your routines can make a world of difference for the kids who need it the most. So as you step into this new year, keep asking yourself, how can I make this space feel steady, calm, and hopeful? Remember, it's the smallest efforts that you can make that make the biggest difference. You may not see that difference now, but it's coming. And it's going to happen eventually. You may not see the efforts of the seeds that you're planting, but it will happen. So as you think about these kids coming back into your classroom for the holidays, be thinking about how you can work with them on an individual basis, and think about how you can focus on fresh starts instead of old stories. It's a simple shift in how we frame conversations about gifts and traditions and vacations that not every child in the classroom has had. So thanks for tuning in today. And if this episode encouraged you, if you learned something, even if it's a little thing, please be sure to share this with another educator who needs a little extra inspiration to start the year strong. As always, keep showing up with grace, empathy, and the heart of Jesus, because you're making an impact one student at a time. I'll see you on the next episode, my friends. Hey, amazing educators, thanks for tuning in. If you found this episode helpful, I'd love for you to hit subscribe and leave a review. Even better, share this episode with a colleague. And hey, I'd love to connect with you on social media. You can even join my Facebook group for some extra support and a dash of inspiration. I've left all the links in the show notes. Until next time, my friend, remember, you're not alone on this journey. You've got this. Keep making a difference and stay teach-tastic.